I grew up in one of those Appalachian towns where people wave when they drive past you, even if they don't know you personally. The population was under 7,000 and my graduating class barely made it past 80 kids. So, it felt like everyone knew everyone else's business. When I left for college 3 hours away, my friend group scattered in different directions. Out of the 8 or so friends I was closest with, the only ones I really kept in touch with were Mac and Devin. This story happened last September, almost a year ago now. Devin's dad had been killed suddenly in a car accident on his way to work. It was the kind of call you don't expect to get. And when my mom told me, I just sat there in silence for a while. Mac called too, asking if I was coming back for the funeral. I had a class I couldn't miss on Friday afternoon, so I planned to drive up later that day and at least spend time with them afterward. Devin didn't have much family around, so Mac and I wanted to make sure she wasn't left sitting alone. That evening, the 3 of us ended up at Mac's house. We pulled out board games, streamed a couple of shows, and just let the hours pass while trying to keep the mood from sinking too deep. Devin smiled here and there, but you could see how drained she was. Even so, for a night that started in tragedy, it felt almost normal being together again. By the time I looked at my phone, it was pushing past midnight, and I figured it was time to head home. The drive from Mac's place to my parents' house barely takes 2 minutes during the day, but it's a twisting, hilly road. And at night, it's pitch black. No street lights at all. Just the occasional reflection of my headlights bouncing off a road sign. You get used to driving those roads if you grow up there, but they can be unnerving when you're by yourself. That night, I wasn't expecting anything unusual, but not even a minute into the drive, I rounded a sharp bend and had to slam my brakes hard. There was a white sedan up ahead, half shoved into a ditch, angled awkwardly into my lane. I swerved around it, my heart racing, and only then did I notice a man stepping into the glow of my headlights, waving his arms. My first thought was that he might be hurt, but the way he stood there, not limping or holding his side, just signaling, made me uneasy. Still, instead of driving on, I slowed down and stopped about 100 foot past him, leaving my car halfway in the grass. As I got out, I could see the other car was pretty banged up in the front, but there were no other vehicles in sight. The man started walking toward me, and the closer he got, the more my instincts told me something wasn't right. He was a stocky guy, maybe in his late 40s, wearing a dirty ball cap. His voice carried no urgency when he said he needed help. He claimed his brother lived nearby and had a truck that could pull him out, but he didn't want me to call the police. He shut that idea down so quickly it caught me off guard. The conversation didn't feel like a normal request for help. His tone was flat, his words short, like he was sticking to a script. Then he asked if I could drive him to his brother's place. I thought about locking myself back in the car and pulling away, but with how close he was standing, I figured if I tried that, he'd just grab the handle and climb in anyway. So I made a quick decision. Better to let him in on my terms than have him force his way. The second he sat down, I regretted it. His clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His hands were slick with grease, and the smell hit me instantly. It wasn't just sweat. It was the kind of odor that clings to someone who doesn't care about being clean. I pulled back onto the road, trying to keep my breathing steady, and he immediately started talking. He asked my name, where I lived, what I did. I dodged the questions as best I could, answering vaguely because I didn't want him knowing anything personal. He kept running his hand across the dashboard, pressing buttons like a little kid. Except the way he said, "This is a nice car, a really nice car. I'd kill to have a car like this." Made my chest tighten. He said it without emotion, like it was just a fact. Maybe some people would brush that off as just a saying, but sitting alone in the dark with him beside me, it didn't feel harmless. The road he directed me to was even narrower than the one I'd come from, more like a hollow that barely fit my car. He kept changing his story about how far his brother's house was. First saying it was a mile from his wreck, then a mile from where we were, then pointing toward a gravel road that climbed steeply into the mountain. That was the last straw for me. I stopped right there, put the car in park, and told him it was time to get out. He didn't like that answer. He leaned toward me, insisting we were close, his voice still strangely flat, except for this almost mocking way he dragged out his words. I reached down and picked up the ice scraper I kept on the floorboard, resting it in my lap. His eyes flicked down to it, and I think that's what finally made him reconsider. Slowly, he opened the passenger door. The interior light came on, and for the first time, I got a really good look at his face. His teeth were in terrible shape, yellowed and broken, and he grinned at me like he found the whole thing amusing. "Please," he said, almost singing it, like he thought he could guilt me. I shook my head and kept my voice firm. "No, out." He stepped out, but leaned back in for one last line. "I really like your car," he said with that same grin before slamming the door. I whipped the car around in the first driveway I could find and started back toward the main road. When I passed the spot where I dropped him off, he wasn't heading up the gravel road at all. He was walking down the hollow toward town. The wrecked sedan was still sitting in the ditch untouched. I didn't slow down again. I drove straight home, locked the doors, and lay awake for hours. The whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about how easily that night could have gone differently if I'd hesitated for too long. Stations, usually in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles into the forest. The one I chose was pretty much the most isolated one I could find. It was easier to rent, having available slots basically through the whole summer, and I liked hiking anyway. There was only a single picture I could find of it, though, and it was super old and blurry, so really I had no clue what to expect of the lookout itself. I drove up a dirt road into the national park, and once I reached the parking lot, it was a 3-mile hike to get there. I had my backpack, tent, and supplies, and I was ready for the trip. The trail was steep, winding, and filled with roots. But the deeper I went, the quieter everything felt. Eventually, I broke through the trees and saw it. The old wooden fire lookout perched on the mountain edge, with a stunning panoramic view of the endless forest below. The place looked abandoned, even though I knew it was rented out sometimes. The wooden steps creaked under my weight, the windows were dusty, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. Inside, there was a cot, a chair, and an old wooden desk. Not much else. Still, the view was incredible. I set up my stuff, made some food, and sat by the window, watching the horizon fade into dusk. That first night was unsettling. The woods are loud, but in the middle of the night, everything went completely silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just dead silence. I woke up to it and sat there in the cot, listening. Then, from the treeline below, I heard what sounded like faint footsteps crunching leaves. Slow, deliberate, moving toward the base of the lookout. I told myself it was just an animal, but the steps were steady, 2 feet, not 4. My heart pounded as I sat frozen in the dark, staring out the window, but I couldn't see anything. Finally, the sound stopped. The rest of the night, I barely slept, waiting, listening, but nothing else happened. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. Maybe I imagined it. I went for a hike, cooked some food, and spent the day reading on the porch of the lookout. By evening, I started to feel better, like maybe I had just been paranoid. But that night, around the same time, the silence fell again. Then came the crunch of footsteps, closer this time. I stood by the window, staring into the blackness. Suddenly, I saw movement. Just for a second, a figure standing at the tree line, watching. It was tall, unmoving, just staring up at me. I blinked, and it was gone. I slammed the shutters closed and stayed awake all night, clutching the flashlight. By morning, I packed my things and hiked back down the mountain as fast as I could. When I turned in the keys at the ranger station, I mentioned hearing footsteps and seeing someone near the lookout. The ranger gave me a strange look and said, "You must have been mistaken. That lookout hasn't been rented in years." I used to work night shift security at a small regional airport. It wasn't a bad gig. Mostly just watching cameras, doing the occasional patrol, and making sure no one wandered where they weren't supposed to be. The airport shut down completely after midnight. No flights in or out until morning. By 1 a.m., the place was usually a ghost town. One night, I was sitting in the office watching the monitors when I saw movement near one of the boarding gates. At first, I figured it was just a janitor, But when I zoomed the camera in, I saw a man standing there. He was tall, thin, and dressed in an old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd expect to see in the 1950s. He wasn't moving, just standing by the window, staring out at the runway. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, thinking maybe someone had slipped in somehow. By the time I got to the gate, though, the place was empty. No man, no footprints, nothing. Just silence and the faint hum of the lights overhead. I shrugged it off and went back to the office. An hour later, I saw him again. Same gate, same exact spot, just standing there. I rushed over quicker this time, hoping to catch him, but again, nothing. The weird part was, when I looked at the camera feed after returning, the man was still there, clear as day on the screen, while I had just been standing in that exact spot. But the gate was empty when I was there in person. Kept happening night after night. Always at the same gate. Always at the same time. He would stand there for a few minutes, then vanish. I stopped even trying to chase him. But one night, I stayed watching on the monitor instead of running out there. And for the first time, he moved. He slowly turned from the window and looked straight up, directly into the camera. I swear, for a split second, I felt like he was staring at me, not just the lens. His face was pale, eyes dark, and then the feed glitched, static and distortion, before clearing back up. He was gone. The next morning, I asked one of the older employees about that gate. He gave me this uneasy look and said, "That used to be the gate for Flight 237. Back in 1955, it crashed just after takeoff. No survivors. People around here say sometimes the passengers still come back, waiting for a flight that'll never leave."